What was the cringiest thing the class clown did that went too far? First of all, thank you for your likes and subscriptions. Let's get started. We had a substitute teacher for social studies in the 8th grade who was unable to keep the class under control. He was unable to stop us from chatting. We were all talking at the same time. To ultimately convince us to give up, he yelled angrily as he counted down from 10. The moment he said 1, the class became silent, and my friend let out one of his loudest farts ever. It was amusing. This man spent the entire day in a suit and carrying a briefcase because he had a presentation in the afternoon. He looked to be in his early to mid-20s, and he was 19 years old. He walks into our morning session, which had a sub, and says, "They actually called me in for this class this morning, but I assume they didn't inform you. All morning long, they tried to get in touch with you to inform you." After some argument, the real substitute teacher packed up his belongings and left. He launched into a semi-rant in which he said that this particular incident had occurred numerous times previously and that he was disappointed with his union. One of the math instructors at the middle school had an arm that stopped at the elbow. I'm not sure if she had it removed or if it was a birth defect. She once held her arms out to the sides while she spoke about a math issue involving an airplane. Roger, we have a broken wing." A young child called out from the back of the room, imitating an aviation radio. The instructor was visibly unhappy, but handled it well. It was the funniest thing ever in the eyes of the kids. Middle school students are vicious. This occurred during a university course in the 3rd year. Exercise and disease prevention were the topics covered in class. The professor was presenting some PowerPoint slides when he made the suggestion that certain ailments could benefit from exercise. A slide on Huntington's disease followed with the description of symptoms like disease, muscle stiffness, slow, erratically moving, sluggish or unusual eye movements, impaired posture, balance, and gait, difficulties in physical speech pronunciation, difficulty swallowing. Someone in the class said, "Well, I guess my girlfriend has this," after the final paragraph was read. Laughter followed. The professor grinned as he nodded in agreement while glancing at the student. Our senior year, the class clown was killed in a vehicle accident. It was very upsetting because he was a great, hilarious person who always made people smile. I can very clearly recall one really miserable day. One of those days that only teenagers may experience, where you are unhappy without cause and your unhappiness only makes things worse. Robert was standing behind me as I sat at my desk when suddenly I heard a loud smacking sound, like someone was chewing gum. It was quite noisy. Like so loud that it caused the teacher to pause and everyone to turn to face him. I asked Robert, "What are you doing?" as I turned around. I was the only one who could hear him whisper, "I got some candy corn." After which, he resumed loud smacking so that everyone can hear. Totally changed the course of my day. Our teacher was late, so he decided to be our new teacher. Best feature, she gave him the lecture when the real teacher arrived a half hour late. He is the kind of person that can make you laugh by just looking at you. Think of the coolest, funniest person you know as your instructor. He taught me more than our actual teacher ever did. And in that way, history class became a class about fishing, video games, zebras, and pink glitter socks on Jupiter. French instructor. "Hey, treat me with respect. Please treat me like your mommy." Class clown. "Okay, where's my meal?" The entire class chuckles. She abruptly got up during a physics lecture, took a fresh tampon out of her bag, went to the sink in the back of the class, drenched it in water, and tossed it as forcefully as she could into the ceiling. The teacher was just standing there with her mouth open, as if she had no idea what to do, as there was a huge splat as it lodged in the top of one of the drop ceiling tiles. The best thing is that the tampon is still affixed to the ceiling from when I just visited my high school for homecoming. This took place in 2006. My electronics instructor in high school, an Air Force veteran who had seen it all and had no more F's to give, is the only class clown I can really recall. He must have had tenure because of all the crap this guy got away with. He installed remote control software on each computer in the classroom, and he would use it to play tricks on other students. He once faked to erase a child's project, and the boy's guttural, high-pitched response was priceless. He assembled a functional catapult from scrap wood, wood blocks, duct tape, and rubber bands, until someone protested to the vice president and had the item seized. He spent 2 weeks throwing relatively small things at uninvited students as they worked on their soldering task. He was curiously poor at utilizing kitchen equipment, and he repeatedly set off the fire alarm with things like burnt toast and microwave pizza, which, as you all know, leads to the evacuation of the entire school. How he used a microwave pizza to trigger a fire alarm is still a mystery to us. Also, based on what I witnessed him doing in 2004, I firmly believe he invented the sideways toaster grilled cheese sandwich. At that time, there was no fire alarm. He created a model of an 8-inch remote control helicopter from scratch and used it to harass everyone in the classroom, not just the pupils. I recall the time he brought a female coworker over, perhaps because they were dating, and as she was leaving, he crashed the helicopter on her butt. One pupil brought a huge bottle of Crimson Gatorade to class each day to consume. When the child went to the bathroom one day, the teacher replaced the day's Gatorade bottle with an identical-looking one that was filled with some sort of foul-tasting liquid colored the same color. The instructor had saved one of the child's empty bottles. In middle school, my pals and I used to be the class clowns. The moment when we all purchased universal remote watches stands out in my mind as the most unforgettable event. Yes, they are real. We assigned them tasks in the classrooms one day, and when we had a sub, I was in charge of the TV on the left side of the room. My friend was in charge of the TV on the right, which was in kind of a storage closet without a door. When our teacher returned the following day, we used the entire time to turn the televisions on and off while ramping up the volume. When we started switching stations, our teacher literally started to lose her head and went insane. She didn't think to unhook them, and after about 30 minutes and a breakdown that came more severe, she called the IT experts. They arrived and simply unplugged them and removed them from the room. They returned the following class. Repeat. One of the TVs has been changed for the following class. We readjust, with my friend in charge of the VR this time. The following day, we gave her a break. We brought in a copy of the effin' Fritz's Lang's Metropolis that was always on the shelf next to my dad's computer and took turns turning on and off the television as images of robots appeared in black and white. However, this was what I now know was the Giorgio Moroder remake, so there was some pretty effing weird music that none of us had ever heard because this was the early 2000s and we were both 12 at the time. This one didn't make my teacher go crazy. She simply stood there, her mouth gaping in confusion and rage as she continued to look at it. She then proceeded to the TV, removed the tape from the VCR, and disconnected the entire TV VCR cart setup. She then sat down at her desk and continued to look intently at it while speaking in an unnervingly calm tone. She told us all that we had screwed up and that she had been the target of pranks. She then called the tech support team, who inquired right away if anyone had a remote. Nobody had a remote control. Tech men kind of consider this. They circle the space while gazing at SH. One of them catches the slide of my friend's very huge watch. Then he notices mine is the same. The puzzle comes complete. We are completely suspended, but we continue to exist in legend for a long time. Because he frequently arrived late due to riding his bike to school, our French teacher was particularly hard on him at this point. But when the teacher gives us back a vocabulary exam one day, my friend receives a failing grade. He suddenly turns to face the corner of the class and begins to eat his test. The instructor notices it, approaches me, and queries me. What's up with him? He's fine, right? I just mentioned that he probably found it difficult to digest his results. Let's name him Clark. Clark was a man in our class who was tremendously funny and had perfect comedic timing. Our previous English instructor had a family emergency, so we had just started the year with a new teacher. Nonetheless, nobody loved her teaching style or the absurd quantity of homework we had to complete each day, like 10 hours a week just from her. When Clark asked to use the restroom, our teacher gave him a lengthy and sarcastic justification before changing the subject from the presidential debates. She was able to conclude her purposefully long rambling before Clark was allowed to use the lavatory. Our teacher was unaware of his return when he returned, so he made the decision to have fun. She's seated in front of her sizable desk. Our teacher blabs on, boring us all to death, as Clark stands behind her. After telling a joke, Clark then dances a little, making the entire class giggle. Seeing how smug she now appears, Clark begins to imitate her by crossing his arms and grinning awkwardly. She then gets up from her desk and writes on the board there. Before she can turn her vast girth 180 degrees, Clark silently dives behind her desk while thinking quickly. Clark furiously waves his hands under the desk as she moves behind it to write the many sorts of irony. The entire class bursts out laughing. She looks at us and wonders why we are crying with laughter. Clark screams at the top of his lungs and makes the desk screech across the floor as she sits down at her desk. Then, our teacher freezes in place while still seated. We are laughing so hard that we are sobbing, and we are having the time of our lives. Only once we settle down and detect a slight leaking sound does it get even better. She then stands up and exits while sporting a sizable stain on her clothes. We erupt once more. About 20 minutes later, the bell rings, and we leave for lunch. Everyone knew that kid's primary caregivers were two lesbian women, and he often made jokes about it. When he was acting like a smart A in class in 8th grade, the instructor threatened to call his mother. He responds, "That's okay, but just let me know which one," without missing a beat. I'll never forget watching her mouth open as the entire class burst into laughter, leaving her momentarily speechless. Eddie is the class clown, plays football, and enjoys skipping class a lot. He was in risk of not graduating his final year since he missed so many days. He'll be returning for another year after just one more lesson. Due to the tiny town and the fact that his parents have known many teachers for a long time, they have virtually the whole student body on Eddie watch to make sure he doesn't skip any more courses. During the penultimate week of school, teachers found him wandering the corridors a few times and had to assist him to his courses. On the final day of classes, it is the last period. The administration made attendance mandatory and required every teacher to take attendance because they knew seniors loved to skip the last day. When I arrived for calculus class, our instructor, who is also an assistant football coach, takes attendance. He realizes right away that Eddie is missing. He instructs us to wait while he makes a call to the head office. Eddie attended school today, as has been confirmed. Teacher disconnects. Oh my God, Eddie. Has anyone seen him? A girl yells, "He's doing it!" and points to the window facing the soccer field 2 seconds later. The assistant principal, 3 teachers, and Eddie are running after each other as they run across the field while Eddie throws his schoolwork into the air. The gym instructor dives to tackle him, trips and falls. The assistant principal trips and falls on his behind on the slick grass. The 2 remaining staff members stop, their hands on their knees, panting for air as Eddie dashes triumphantly across the parking lot. The entire class burst into cheers, and we can hear the cheers coming from the classes on either side of us. Eddie had to stay for an additional year. I once called a friend while taking an exam while using my phone to read the questions and possible answers out loud. My friend and I were debating on how to solve the problem after I asked my friend what the answer was when my teacher sternly called my name. I then called my friend back while apologizing to my teacher in the hallway. I finished the test and I returned to class and submitted it. I had the choice of getting a 0 on the test or telling the principal what had happened, who would have suspended me for just using a cell phone in the class. I took a 0 even though I was doing well in the class. We had a science instructor who was, to put it mildly, interesting. He was facing the class clown, but he really wasn't looking at him as he knelt down to assist a child. Anyway, he spends about 5 minutes chatting to the student he is assisting as the class becomes unruly. The class clown starts stealing people's pencils and sticking them in the ceiling all around his desk. He goes and fetches a box full of extra pencils after he had placed a good 7 pencils in the ceiling. Remember that despite not paying attention, the teacher is facing him. Anyway, he threw a ton of pencils up there, around 29 if my memory serves me well. As the instructor had finished assisting the child, she glanced up and yelled at the entire class, demanding that we identify the perpetrator. When none of us admitted responsibility, he continued by issuing infractions to the entire class. Happy times. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you soon.